Hello and welcome back, dear students. Wish you all stay happy, healthy, and safe at home and do your studies regularly and properly. I'm Yojana Parak, and today we are going to see a chapter for Standard 11 students from Organization of Commerce and Management. We are going to see 7th chapter. The name of this chapter is Public Sector, Private Sector, and Global Enterprises. This is fourth part of this chapter. Let us quickly revise what we learned in the previous video and then we will move to the next topic, that is public sector, for this video. So let us begin now. Comparison of government enterprises on different bases. According to establishment, government department already exist which are controlled by government. Public corporation come into existence especially by passing an act in the parliament or legislative assembly. And government companies are also established to compete with the private companies, and it comes into existence through the Companies Act. As it is company, it has to follow the Companies Act provisions. Legal entity. So government department does not have a separate identity from government, but public corporation and government company have separate identity from government department, and they are separate on the basis of law. Public corporation comes into existence by a special act, so it has separate identity, and government companies also established according to the Companies Act, not according to the government provisions, so it also has separate identity than government. Next one is the favorable in which sector. So government department is favorable in public service and defense sector. These two sectors are more reliable in government's hand rather than in private sector. So that is why government department is useful for the public service and defense sector. And public corporation is useful for industrial enterprises and public services. Government companies are useful for industrial enterprise and foreign venture companies because they rely more on government companies rather than private company to do investment. Next is source of capital. So government department is a part of government, so it get fund from government budget. But public corporation and government companies get investment through government. Working capital is also allocated to government department through the government budget. But in public corporation and government companies, if they want, they can raise extra money from public also, other and over and above that investment made by government. But government department will get all the fund only by the government budget. Responsibilities. So government department have to give answer or are responsible towards the related minister of the department. If it is railway department, then they are responsible towards railway minister. And as the public corporation comes into existence by the special act passed in the legislative assembly and parliament, so they are responsible towards legislative assembly and parliament. Government companies are also responsible towards legislative assembly and parliament, because they are separate from government, so they do not have to answer that particular minister but have to answer to the legislative assembly and parliament. Next is autonomy in management. Government department does not have any kind of autonomy. All the rules regulations are made by government only. But in public corporation and government companies, they have autonomy up to some point, because government cannot directly interfere in day-to-day work. So they have autonomy but not completely. Next one is employees. So as the government department is part of government, so employees working in government department are treated as government employees. But as the public corporation and government companies have their own separate rules and regulation, so their employees have to be appointed and will be given the salary and the work atmosphere according to their own rules, which are made by that particular public corporation or government company. So they are not relying on the government rules much. So the employees working in public corporation and government companies are not considered as government employees. Next is management. The management in government department is done by the officers of Indian Administrative Service. But in public corporation and government companies, the management is done by board of directors. But board of directors are employed by government. Next is control. Now, here there will be direct control of government, as it is the part of government. It comes directly and only under the government. But public corporation and government companies are not part of government and they are separate from government. They have separate identity. So government takes control but not much. More control will be of parliament and legislative assembly in public corporation, and in government company that related ministry will have control, because 51% shares are invested by that ministry. So in this way, these were the difference between different government enterprises. Now, these government enterprises will be affected according to the change in government. In government department, all the rules and regulation made by the new government will be applied. So it will be much flexible according to the change in government. But in public corporation and government companies, they want to be much affected by the change of government, because they have their own separate rules and regulations. So government department completely relies on the government, but public corporation and government company have their separate identity and separate purpose other than government. Our next topic is private sector. Private sector, that means in which sector individuals or group of individuals start their business with the objective of earning profit, that is known as private sector. Individual ownership, partnership, Hindu undivided family, cooperative society, and joint stock company are the different type of private sector. So in private sector, the business is run by an individual or group of individuals. They are separate from government. They have their own rules and regulation and own control. So that is why it is known as private sector, which is completely separate from government. Now let us see the characteristics of private sector. From the beginning, there was private sector in the initial stage when the business began. Government was not there to handle every sector. So in the beginning also we had importance and much dependence on private sector, but just to improve the condition of the business and to provide maximum satisfaction to the uh, people of the country, government entered in the business, and mostly all the sectors were taken by government so that they can provide a fair and satisfactory service to the people. But as government started making losses and it was difficult to cover it, rather than development, it was going backward. So they decided that again we should disinvest in public sector and start investing in private sector. So again private sector came into existence. The period from 1950 to 1990 was the period for the public sector, in which it had great influence. But after that, when liberalization and globalization policy was introduced in 1991, so India also adopted it, and because of liberalization and globalization, they somewhat started investing in private sector, and government companies or government uh, departments were partially or completely given to the private sector. So from there again private sector came into existence, and till now also majority part of the national income comes from the private sector only. So private sector is very much important, and it has begun from the ancient time. From the beginning private sector exists. So the first character is oldest form. Private sector is the oldest form, and it has a big share in economy because government will have limited area, will have limited people, but the people of country, by their own efforts, as they are more than government employees, so they can make more money and give more contribution to the economy. So that is why private sector has a big share in economy rather than public sector, because public sector focus on the service and private sector focus on the profit. Next is changes according to the requirement. Now, private sector is completely upon the choice of the person who is running it. So it has much chances to be flexible. But as public sector have to run according to the rules made by government, and they cannot fluctuate it according to their wish. So comparatively, private sector is more flexible and can change according to the requirements. Next is priority to profit and acceptance of social responsibilities. Now, private sector's main motive, main objective is to earn more and more profit. But they also believe that the private sector cannot run without society. So to be in society, they have to look after for society. So they also understand and accept social responsibilities. Along with that, they earn their profit. Social responsibilities such as to provide good quality service to the customer, create less pollution in the environment, to be environment friendly, and customers should be satisfied with their services. So that kind of social responsibility or to help the people of the country by some voluntary acts. So these are social responsibilities of private sector which they perform along with making profit, because other than society they cannot exist, so they try to do some good and kind acts towards society so that they can survive in society with social upliftment of society also, not only of their own. Because if society will grow, their purchase power will grow, their purchase capacity will grow, so it ultimately affect the profit of the company, of the private sector. Next is existence of private sector in all countries. It is universal. In all countries, private sector exists. It will exist for sure. But it may be that the rules or laws can be different in different countries, but we cannot imagine world without private sector. It is an initial, it is an important and necessary part of the economy of every country in the world. So private sector is universal. There may be that in few countries the influence of public sector will be more than private sector, or the influence of public sector will be less than private sector in some countries, but we cannot avoid completely the private sector or public sector. And for sure, in every country, there will be much importance and influence of private sector, because the public is huge, population has more power of making profit than government. So, in every country, there must be great influence of private sector. So, private sector is universal, and universally it has great importance also. Next is inclusion of multinational corporation. So, the business activity taken by a firm in more than one country is known as multinational corporation. Now, multinational companies start uh, their work, their business in more than one country, so the living standard of different countries across the world can be improved by that company. Now, which company is well established will only start their branches in other countries also, and the company which is providing a good quality service in their own country will provide good quality service in other countries. So in this way, living standard of the people of other country also will be improved. This was more and more developed in 19th century. So multinational corporations are very much important and are largely found in private sector only, because in different countries government is different, so government sector cannot enter into other countries. They cannot establish their business in other countries, because in every country government will be different and they will have their own departments. So they won't allow any other country's government to start up their business in any other country. So they can invest, but they cannot establish their business. But private sector companies can establish their business or branch in in other countries also. So it is the boon for private sector. Next is employment generation. In public sector, government, the sector which is or the unit which are held by government is limited, and they can run only according to the rules and regulation made by government. And because of that, they can generate less employment opportunity as compared to private sector, because private sector can open its branches uh, worldwide and can give more employment opportunities to the people. And also in government sector, the person who is employed should have a particular quality or particular skills, then only it gets employment, and it won't leave that place until it gets retired. So that is why in government sector or public sector there are less chances of getting employment. It creates less opportunity of employment as compared to private sector, because it is not compulsory to acquire certain skills or educational degree for getting job in private sector. So those people who are not that much literate or are not able to justify the standard of government sector can get job and employment in private sector. And in this way private sector generate more employment, as it can open its branches in other countries also. So worldwide it creates employment, and if the employment will increase, the living standard of people will increase. In different countries, this facility can be provided of improving their living standard. So here also employment generation is more uh, can be done more by private sector than public sector, because government cannot enter into different countries to generate employment. And even there are some certain criterias, but in private sector they can appoint a person according to their work and give training to that person. So private sector gives more opportunity of employment, not only in their own country but in other countries also. And as the area of private sector is larger than public sector, so because of that also private sector generates more employment opportunities. So these were the characteristics of private sector. That private sector is the oldest form. It has big share in economy because the criteria is more wide than public sector. And It can change according to the requirement, and the priority of private sector is profit, but it also accepts the social responsibility. And private sector can expand to other countries also, so it is universal, and are more chance have more chances of development. And private sector include multinational corporation also. In every country private sector is acceptable, so it is universal, and private companies can expand their branches in various countries. So it is multinational also, and it creates more employment because of vast and huge uh, area covered by private sector in economy. And even because of multinational corporation, it gives employment in other countries also. So in this way private sector is uh, more wide and have much importance in the economy. Now we will move to the comparison between public sector and private sector. It is very simple and short and easy to understand as we have seen both the sector. So first, the ownership. In public sector, ownership will be in the hand of government, either central government, state government, or jointly by both of them, by central or state government. But in private sector, ownership will be held by the individual or group of individuals. So public sector is having is the ownership in public sector is completely in the hand of government, and in private sector the ownership is completely in the hand of individuals or group of individuals. Control. As it is owned by government, so it can be controlled easily by the government only. And in private sector, through various laws, government can control the private sector, but it cannot enter into the day-to-day decisions. So there will be control under individuals or group of individuals, but government can also occupy control according to the various laws. Main objective. Now public sector has main objective of social welfare, but private sector's main objective is to earn profit. Social welfare is a secondary objective, while public sector has secondary objective of earning profit. Next is profitability. Due to government control, it is not keen for profit maximization. Their objective is to provide social welfare, not to earn more and more profit. So they are not keen for profit maximization, while private sector is keen for profit maximization. That is their only main objective. Next one is the nature. Now, public sector have three types: government department, public corporation, and government companies. And in private sector, individual ownership, partnership, Hindu undivided family, cooperative society, and joint stock companies are different types of private sector. So here we come to an end of this video also. Now in next video we will see global enterprises. I hope that this explanation will be useful for you. And now let us quickly revise what we learned. That how private sector came into existence. It was existing through the initial time But when government felt that improvement should be done in the scenario of economy, so they controlled many sector in their hand. But then when they felt that government sector or public sector is making loss, so again they had to disinvest, and they invested in private sector, and private sector again came into influence after 1991 through the policy of liberalization and globalization. And the meaning of private sector is that the ownership will be with individuals or group of individuals, and they have their own law. Their main objective is to earn profit, and secondary objective is social welfare. Now the types of private sector are individual ownership, partnership, Hindu undivided family, cooperative society, and joint stock company. Then we saw characteristics of private sector, that it is the oldest form, and it has big share in economy because government sector is limited, but private sector can expand according to its wish. And even government private sector can change according to the requirement, according to the time and circumstances. And the priority, the main objective of private sector is to earn profit, but it also accept its social responsibilities along with earning or maximizing profit. And private sector is universal, it exists in all the countries, and even it can expand to different countries, so it is multinational also. And because of its multinational nature, it can create more and more employment. And then we saw the difference between public sector and private sector, that the ownership in public sector is with government, and in private sector it is with individual or group of individual. And then as the ownership is with government, so control will be also with government in public sector, and in private sector the control is with individuals or group of individuals, but government can control through various laws. So indirectly government can control private sector, but in public sector there will be direct control. Now the main objective of public sector is social welfare and upliftment, and private sector's main objective is to profit maximizing the profit. And profitability is not much important in public sector, but profitability is the main motive of private sector. And the nature of public sector are government department, public corporation, and government companies. And in private sector there are the different types, such as individual ownership, partnership, Hindu undivided family, cooperative society, and joint stock companies. That we will see about this in detail in other chapters. Here only brief of this is given. Now, with this, we come to an end of this video, and now we will meet in the next video. I hope that this explanation will be useful for you. Thanks for being with me. See you.